She gave birth alone in the frozen wilderness, cast out by her own people for carrying the child of their enemy, left to die with winter wolves circling closer. But the solitary cowboy who found her tracks in the snow that morning wasn't just a drifter looking for shelter. He was salvation itself. The Blackfoot Council had spoken with the finality of winter thunder. Luna Moon Hunter knelt in the center of the sacred circle, her swollen belly obvious beneath her elk-hide dress, as Chief Standing Bear pronounced her fate. The tribal elders sat like stone monuments around the fire, their weathered faces showing no mercy for the woman who had once been considered their finest healer.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
You have brought shame upon the Blackfoot Nation. Standing Bear's voice cut through the November air like a blade forged in ice. You carry the seed of our enemies. You have lain with a white soldier and chosen to birth a half-blood child that will forever remind us of our defeat at Little Creek. This child cannot be born among us. Luna's hands instinctively moved to protect her unborn baby as the chief continued his harsh judgment. She had known this moment would come ever since her belly began to show, ever since the other women started whispering and pointing when she walked through the village. The shame had followed her like a shadow, growing darker each day. The ancestors speak through me now. Standing Bear raised his war staff, adorned with eagle feathers and bear claws. Luna Moon Hunter, daughter of Gray Wolf, healer of our people, you are no longer welcome in this sacred place. You will leave when the sun rises tomorrow, taking nothing but the clothes on your back. You will not return. Your name will be forgotten. The other women of the tribe, many of whom Luna had helped deliver their own children, sat in silence. Some looked away in shame, others stared with cold judgment. Her own sister, Singing Bird, covered her face with her hands and wept quietly. Even her closest friend, Dawn Walker, refused to meet her eyes. Luna's mother, White Dove, had died the previous winter from the same fever that had taken so many others. Her father, Gray Wolf, had been killed at Little Creek 6 months ago, along with 30 other warriors, including the man Luna had been promised to marry. If they were still alive, perhaps they could have protected her from this humiliation. But she was alone now, carrying the consequences of one night of passion that had changed everything. The fire crackled and sparked as wind swept through the camp, carrying the scent of snow from the distant mountains. Winter was coming early this year, and everyone knew it. The buffalo herds had already moved south, and the geese had long since disappeared from the sky. This was the worst possible time to exile anyone, especially a pregnant woman. Please, Luna finally spoke, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her heart. I have served this tribe faithfully for 23 summers. I have delivered your children, healed your sick, prepared your dead for the spirit world. I ask not for forgiveness, but for mercy until my child is born. Chief Standing Bear's expression remained unmoved. You showed no mercy to our fallen warriors when you opened your legs to their killer. You showed no loyalty to your people when you chose pleasure over honor. Why should we show you what you did not show us? The accusation struck Luna like a physical blow. The soldier she had loved was not the one who killed her father, but truth mattered little when grief and anger ruled the council's hearts. Her romance with Lieutenant David Morrison had begun during a brief peace negotiation, when he had served as translator due to his knowledge of the Blackfoot language. He had been gentle, respectful, nothing like the brutal cavalry officers who usually dealt with her people. But David had been transferred to another fort before Luna discovered she was carrying his child. She had tried to send word to him, but letters had a way of disappearing in the wilderness, and she never knew if he received her messages. When the attack on Little Creek happened 3 months later, every white soldier became the enemy in her people's eyes, including the father of her unborn baby. The decision is final, Standing Bear declared, striking his staff against the ground 3 times. When the sun touches the eastern mountains tomorrow, you will be gone. Any who help you will face the same punishment. This council is finished. As the elders dispersed and the crowd began to break apart, Luna remained, kneeling by the dying fire. The reality of her situation crashed over her like a frozen waterfall. She was 8 months pregnant, winter was approaching, and she would soon be alone in the wilderness with nothing but the clothes she wore. Even if she somehow survived giving birth, how could she possibly care for a newborn in the wild, singing? Bert approached hesitantly once the others had gone. "Luna, I'm so sorry. I tried to speak for you, but Father wouldn't listen. He says the pain of losing Grey Wolf has made the council's hearts too hard for forgiveness." "I understand," Luna whispered, struggling to her feet with her sister's help. "They need someone to blame for all the death and suffering. I've become a convenient target. Where will you go?" Singing Bird asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The nearest white settlement is 3 days' ride south, and you can't travel that distance in your condition." Luna looked toward the dark mountains rising against the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there was a future she couldn't yet imagine. If she could survive long enough to reach it. "I'll find a way. I always have," that night, as Luna gathered her few possessions in secret. Several women came to her lodge under cover of darkness. Dawn Walker brought dried meat and pemmican wrapped in hide. Bright Star gave her a warm buffalo robe that her grandmother had made. Morning Dove pressed a small medicine bundle into her hands, containing herbs for pain and healing. "We cannot speak for you openly," Dawn Walker whispered as they embraced one final time. "But we have not forgotten who you are or what you've done for us. May the Great Spirit protect you and your child by dawn." Luna had prepared herself for exile as thoroughly as possible under the circumstances. She wore her warmest dress with leggings underneath, wrapped herself in the buffalo robe, and secured the medicine bundle and food supplies in a leather satchel across her back. She had also taken her father's hunting knife, hidden inside her moccasin, though she hoped never to need it. The village was unusually quiet as she walked through it for the last time. Some people watched from their lodge doorways, while others deliberately looked away. Children she had helped bring into the world peeked at her curiously, not understanding why their former healer was leaving. Dogs that once wagged their tails at her approach now kept their distance, sensing the tension that surrounded her. Chief, standing there, waited at the edge of the camp with 2 warriors, ensuring that Luna actually departed and didn't linger. Nearby, his face remained impassive as she approached, but she thought she saw a flicker of something that might have been regret in his old eyes. "The path south leads to the white settlements," he said curtly. "Follow the river until you reach the trading post at Copper Falls. They will take you in if you can prove yourself useful." Luna nodded without speaking. She understood that this was as close to kindness as the chief could show without appearing weak to his warriors. The trading post was still 2 days away under normal circumstances, but for a heavily pregnant woman traveling alone, it might as well have been on the other side of the world. As she walked away from the only home she had ever known, Luna felt the baby shifting restlessly inside her. She placed a protective hand over her belly and whispered a prayer to the Great Spirit, asking for strength to survive whatever lay ahead. Behind her, the sounds of the village gradually faded until all she could hear was the wind through the grass and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. The first day of exile was deceptively manageable. Luna followed the winding river south, staying close to the water for both navigation and access to drinking water. The walking was difficult with her swollen belly and aching back, but the cool autumn air felt refreshing, and she made steady progress through the familiar landscape. She recognized many landmarks from hunting trips she had taken with her father as a child. The old lightning-struck pine that marked the boundary of Blackfoot territory. The meadow where her mother had taught her to identify healing plants. The rock formation that looked like a sleeping bear from the right angle.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
Each familiar sight felt like a goodbye to her former life. By evening, Luna had traveled perhaps 10 miles from the village, not the distance she had hoped to cover, but respectable given her condition. She found shelter in a grove of cottonwood. Trees near the riverbank, where fallen logs provided both seating and windbreak. Using techniques her father had taught her, she built a small fire and prepared a meal of dried meat and wild roots she had gathered along the way. The night was cold but clear, with countless stars visible in the vast Montana sky. Luna wrapped herself tightly in the buffalo robe and tried to sleep, but the baby seemed determined to practice dancing inside her womb. Every time she dozed off, a particularly strong kick would wake her up again. She began to wonder if the child was as restless about their uncertain future as she was. The second day brought the first real challenges. Luna woke to find frost covering her makeshift camp, and her joints were stiff and sore from sleeping on the hard ground. Worse yet, her lower back had developed a persistent ache that grew stronger. As she walked, she tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just the result of carrying extra weight and sleeping poorly. The landscape began to change as she moved south, becoming more rugged and unfamiliar. The gentle hills near her village gave way to steeper terrain cut by rocky ravines. The river remained her constant companion, but its banks became more difficult to navigate, forcing her to climb over fallen trees and scramble across loose stone. Slopes. By midday, Luna realized she was making much slower progress than the day before. The persistent back pain was affecting her gait, and she found herself stopping frequently to rest. What worried her most was that the pain seemed to be coming in waves, growing stronger and then fading away, only to return a few minutes later with renewed intensity. "Not yet, little one," she whispered to her unborn child as another wave of discomfort washed over her. "We need to reach safety before you decide to join this world." But the baby apparently had its own timeline. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen, Luna felt something warm and wet running down her legs. She looked down in alarm to see fluid soaking through her dress and dripping onto the rocky ground. Her water had broken, and there was no stopping what came next. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as the reality of the situation struck home. She was still a full day's journey from the trading post, alone in the wilderness, and about to give birth with no help and minimal supplies. The nearest Blackfoot village was behind her, but even if she could make it back, the council had made it clear she would not be welcome. Another contraction hit her, stronger than anything she had experienced before, doubling her over with pain. Luna gripped a nearby tree trunk and breathed deeply, trying to remember everything her mother and grandmother had taught her about childbirth. She had assisted at dozens of births, but being the one in labor was entirely different. Looking around desperately for shelter, Luna spotted a shallow cave carved into the cliff face about 50 yards away. It wasn't much, but it would provide protection from wind and any predators that might be drawn by the scent of blood. Gathering her remaining strength, she made her way carefully across the uneven ground, pausing whenever contractions forced her to stop. The cave was small and cramped, barely large enough for one person to lie down comfortably, but it was dry and relatively warm. Luna spread her buffalo robe on the rocky floor and arranged her few supplies within easy reach. The dried meat and pemmican would have to serve as sustenance, and the herbs from her medicine bundle would help with pain and prevent infection. As darkness fell and her labor intensified, Luna found herself truly alone for the first time in her life. No midwife to guide her, no female relatives to offer encouragement, no tribal rituals to ease her passage into motherhood. Just her unborn child, and the vast wilderness stretching endlessly in all directions. The night brought Luna's greatest trial yet. Contractions came in relentless waves, each one more powerful than the last, leaving her gasping and trembling in the confines of the small cave. She had attended enough births to know that first babies often took their time, but this child seemed eager to enter the world despite the harsh circumstances awaiting it. Between contractions, Luna tried to prepare for what was coming. She used her father's knife to cut strips from the hem of her dress, creating makeshift ties for the umbilical cord. She positioned her water container and medicine bundle within easy reach, and she arranged the buffalo robe to provide as clean a surface as possible for the birth. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced, even during her most difficult healing rituals when she had taken on the spiritual suffering of others. This was purely physical, overwhelming, impossible to escape or ignore. She bit down on a piece of leather to keep from crying out, not wanting to attract the attention of wolves or other predators. "Great Spirit, give me strength," she whispered during a brief respite between contractions. "Help me bring this child safely into the world, even if I cannot survive to raise it. Let something good come from all this suffering." The baby had other plans for timing, however. As dawn light began to filter into the cave, Luna felt the overwhelming urge to push. Her body took over, following instincts older than memory, and she bore down with all her remaining strength. The pain reached a crescendo that made her see stars, but she could feel the baby moving down the birth canal with a final, tremendous effort that left her completely exhausted. Luna felt the baby slip free from her body. The sudden release of pressure was so dramatic that she almost fainted, but the sound of a thin, angry cry brought her back to full consciousness. Her child was alive, breathing, protesting this cold new world with remarkable vigor. With shaking hands, Luna reached down and lifted the tiny, slippery form to her chest. A boy, she realized with wonder, small but perfectly formed, with a head of dark hair and the strong lungs of a future warrior. Despite everything that had led to this moment, she felt a rush of pure love so powerful it took her breath away. "Hello, little wolf," she whispered, using the edge of her dress to clean the baby's face. "Welcome to the world, though I'm sorry." It couldn't be a warmer greeting. The practical side of her mind took over as she dealt with the aftermath of birth. She tied off the umbilical cord with her makeshift strips and cut it with her father's knife. The placenta followed shortly after, and she wrapped it carefully in a piece of hide, knowing she would need to bury it properly when she had the strength to leave the cave. Luna's body was racked with exhaustion and blood loss, but she forced herself to stay alert long enough to examine her son thoroughly. All 10 fingers and toes were present and accounted for. His breathing was strong and regular. His skin had a healthy pink color despite the cold. For a baby born under such difficult circumstances, he appeared remarkably healthy. She managed to get him nursing, which helped with both his warmth and her own recovery, as the natural hormones encouraged her body to begin healing. The buffalo robe provided insulation for both of them, and Luna carefully positioned herself to share as much body heat as possible with her newborn son. But as the adrenaline of birth began to fade, Luna became acutely aware of how precarious their situation remained. She was weak from blood loss and had no food except the small amount of dried meat in her pack. The baby would need constant warmth and regular feeding to survive, but she had no way to maintain a fire in the small cave. And she certainly couldn't travel for several days. More troubling still, she could hear sounds outside the cave that suggested they were not alone in this remote area. The distant howl of wolves echoed across the landscape, and she thought she heard the huffing breath of a large animal, possibly a bear, investigating scents near the cave entrance. Predators would be drawn by the smell of blood and the vulnerability of a newborn. Luna clutched her son closer and reached for her father's knife with her free hand. She was too weak to run and too exposed to hide effectively, but she would fight to her last breath to protect this innocent child who had already survived so much. If death was coming for them, it would have to come through her first. As exhaustion finally overcame her fears, Luna dozed fitfully with the baby pressed against her chest. Her dreams were filled with images of her father and mother, standing together in the spirit world and watching over their daughter and grandson. She dreamed of David Morrison, the gentle soldier whose love had created this child, wondering if he would ever know he had a son. But mostly she dreamed of survival, of somehow finding the strength to carry her baby to safety, of proving that love could triumph over hatred and fear. When she woke to the sound of approaching hoofbeats outside the cave, Luna thought at first it was just another dream. The sound of a horse snorting and pawing the ground outside the cave brought Luna instantly awake. She clutched her newborn son protectively and reached for her knife, expecting to face raiders or hostile warriors come to finish what the tribal council had started. Instead, a voice called out in accented English, "Hello in there. I can see tracks leading to that cave, and I'm thinking someone might need help. I'm not looking for trouble, just checking to make sure you're all right." Luna held her breath, uncertain whether to respond. The voice belonged to a white man, but that didn't necessarily make him safe. Too many stories existed of settlers and drifters who took advantage of vulnerable native women. Yet something in his tone suggested genuine concern rather than threat. "Ma'am, I know you're in there," the voice continued, closer now. "I can see blood on the rocks and tracks from a woman's moccasins. If you're hurt, I might be able to help. I've got medical supplies and warm food." Against her better judgment, Luna decided to risk a response. "Stay back," she called out weakly. "I have a weapon, and I'll use it if you try to harm us." "Us?" The man's voice carried genuine surprise. "Ma'am, are you saying there's a baby in there with you? In this weather? Sweet Jesus, we need to get you both somewhere warm right now." A shadow appeared at the cave entrance, and Luna got her first look at her potential rescuer. He was tall and lean, with weathered features and kind eyes the color of summer sky. His clothes marked him as a cowboy or ranch hand, practical and well-worn rather than fancy. Most importantly, his hands were raised peacefully, showing he carried no weapon. "My name's Cole Garrett," he said softly, crouching down to appear less threatening. "I was tracking some strays when I noticed your trail. Looks like you've been through quite an ordeal." Luna studied his face carefully, using all her instincts as a healer to read his character. She saw weariness, loneliness, and genuine compassion, but no hint of deception or cruelty. After a moment, she lowered her knife slightly. "I gave birth last night," she admitted. "My son and I need shelter, but I don't know if I can trust you." Cole's expression softened with understanding. "Ma'am, I give you my word as a Christian man that I mean you no harm. But that baby's going to freeze to death if we don't get him somewhere warm soon. My cabin's only about 2 miles from here, with a good fire and plenty of supplies. Why would you help us?" Luna asked suspiciously. Most white men wouldn't risk their reputation for an Indian woman and her half-breed child. The blunt question seemed to surprise Cole, but he answered honestly. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because every life has value, no matter who your parents were or what mistakes they might have made. And because I know what it's like to be alone in the world with nowhere to turn." Something in his voice convinced Luna that he was telling the truth. More practically, she knew her son would not survive another night in the wilderness without proper shelter and warmth. She had to take the risk. "If you try to hurt us or sell us to slavers, I'll kill you," she warned. Though her weakness made the threat somewhat hollow, Cole actually smiled at that. "Yes, ma'am, I expect you would. Now let's get you both out of this cave and somewhere safe," moving with surprising gentleness for such a large man. Cole helped Luna to her feet and supported her as she wrapped the baby securely in the buffalo robe. She was shocked by how weak she felt when she tried to stand, and she probably would have collapsed without his steady arm around her waist. Cole's horse was a sturdy bay gelding with the calm temperament of an animal accustomed to unusual situations. He helped Luna mount carefully, making sure she could hold the baby securely. then swung up behind her to provide additional support and warmth during the ride to his cabin. The journey to Cole's home passed in a blur of exhaustion and pain. For Luna, she was dimly aware of the landscape changing from rocky wilderness to rolling grassland, but most of her attention was focused on keeping her son warm and protected from the wind. Cole spoke softly to both her and the baby during the ride, his voice providing an oddly comforting presence. When they finally reached the cabin, Luna was amazed by what she saw. It was modest but well-built, with a stone chimney sending smoke into the clear mountain air and glass windows that spoke of prosperity. A small barn and corral suggested Cole was indeed a rancher, though apparently one who lived alone. "Home sweet home," Cole said as he helped her down from the horse. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry, and that's what matters right now, inside." The cabin was clean and comfortable, with handmade furniture and a large stone fireplace that radiated blessed warmth. Cole quickly stoked the fire to a roaring blaze, then helped Luna settle into a comfortable chair with thick cushions. The contrast between this cozy refuge and the cold cave where she'd given birth was almost overwhelming. "Let me take a look at that little one," Cole said gently. "I've helped birth plenty of calves and foals, so I know something about newborns." Luna hesitated, then carefully unwrapped her son for Cole's inspection. The baby was awake and alert, his dark eyes studying this strange new world with apparent curiosity. Cole examined him with practiced hands, checking his breathing, his color, and his responsiveness. "He's a strong one," Cole declared with genuine admiration. "Born in a cave during a cold snap, and he's still fighting like a little warrior. You did good, ma'am. Real good, for the first time since her exile began." Luna allowed herself to hope that both she and her child might actually survive this ordeal. Wrapped in warm blankets by a crackling fire, with a kind stranger offering help instead of judgment, she felt some of the crushing weight of despair begin to lift from her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying depths of gratitude she couldn't begin to express. "You may have saved our lives." Cole just nodded and began preparing food, as if rescuing desperate women and newborns was something he did every day. Luna watched him work and wondered what had brought this lonely cowboy to her moment of greatest need, and whether the Great Spirit had finally answered her prayers for protection. The first week at Cole Garrett's cabin passed like a dream for Luna Moonhunter. After months of fear and uncertainty, followed by the trauma of exile and childbirth, the simple luxury of safety felt almost surreal. She woke each morning to the sound of Cole quietly stoking the fire, always careful not to disturb her rest, and fell asleep each night to the comforting presence of another human being who seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare. Cole had insisted she take his bed while he slept on a makeshift pallet near the fireplace. "A new mother needs proper rest," he'd said firmly when she protested. "I've spent plenty of nights sleeping rough, and I'll sleep a lot better knowing you and the baby are comfortable." Her son, whom she had named Joseph in honor of his father's middle name, was thriving under the cabin's warmth and protection. The baby nursed eagerly and slept peacefully between feedings, his small body gradually filling out as he recovered from the harsh circumstances of his birth. Cole had carved a beautiful wooden cradle from cedar, working late into the evening by lamplight to create something worthy of the child. "Every baby deserves a proper bed," Cole had explained when Luna expressed amazement at his craftsmanship. "This little fellow's been through enough hardship already." Luna herself was healing more slowly, both physically and emotionally. The blood loss from childbirth had left her weak and dizzy, and Cole had to help her walk to the kitchen for meals during her first few days in the cabin. More challenging was the deep exhaustion that seemed to penetrate her very bones, the result of months of stress and fear followed by the ordeal of solo birth. But Cole proved to be an unexpectedly capable caregiver. He prepared nourishing soups and stews to help rebuild her strength, and he'd somehow acquired a collection of herbs that he used to brew healing teas. When Luna asked where he'd learned such skills, His answer surprised her. "Had a wife once," he said simply, not meeting her eyes. "Sarah got real sick our second winter together, and I had to learn nursing pretty quick. Doctor was 3 days ride away, and she couldn't wait that long." The past tense in his voice told Luna everything she needed to know about how that story had ended. She didn't press for details, understanding that everyone carried grief in their own way. Instead, she simply thanked him for sharing his knowledge with her and Joseph. As her physical strength gradually returned, Luna began to take on small tasks around the cabin. She couldn't bear to remain completely idle while Cole worked so hard to care for them. She started by mending clothes, using skills her mother had taught her to repair the tears and worn spots in Cole's work shirts and pants. "You don't need to do that," Cole protested when he found her sewing by the firelight. "You should be resting." "I need to feel useful," Luna replied honestly. "I've been a healer my entire adult life. Sitting idle while someone else takes care of me feels wrong somehow." Cole studied her face in the flickering light, seeming to understand the deeper need behind her words. "Well, I reckon those shirts could use some attention. Haven't had anyone to mend them properly in quite a while." As the days passed and Luna grew stronger, she began to learn more about the man who had saved her life. Cole Garrett was 32 years old, originally from Kansas, where his family had owned a small farm. He'd come west after the war, looking for a fresh start and a chance to build something of his own. "Lost too many friends in that war," he told her one evening, as they sat by the fire after Joseph had fallen asleep. "Figured I needed to find a place where death hadn't touched everything yet." He'd worked as a hired hand on several large ranches before saving enough money to claim his own land under the Homestead Act. The cabin and surrounding 160 acres were entirely his, earned through 5 years of back-breaking labor and careful saving. He ran a small herd of cattle and a few horses, making a modest but honest living. "It's not much compared to the big spreads," Cole said with quiet pride, "but it's mine fair and square. No one can take it away from me as long as I work the land and pay my taxes." Luna understood the deep satisfaction in his voice. Ownership meant security, independence, the freedom to make choices about one's own life. It was something her people had lost when the white settlers arrived, and something she had never expected to experience herself. The tragedy that had shaped Cole's adult life had occurred 3 years earlier. His wife Sarah had been pregnant with their first child when she contracted a severe fever during a particularly harsh winter. Cole had fought desperately to save both her and the baby, riding through blizzards to fetch a doctor, trying every remedy he could think of or find in medical books. Lost them both in the same night, Cole said quietly, staring into the fire. Sarah went first, and the baby followed a few hours later. "Little girl. We were going to name her Emma." The raw pain in his voice made Luna's heart ache for him. She recognized the deep wound that never quite healed, the kind of loss that changed a person forever. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Losing a child is the worst pain there is. That's why I couldn't just ride past when I found your tracks." Cole continued. Couldn't stand the thought of another woman going through what Sarah did, all alone with no one to help. Luna began to understand that rescuing her and Joseph had been as much about Cole's healing as theirs. By saving them, he was somehow honoring the wife and child he hadn't been able to save. It gave deeper meaning to his kindness and explained his seemingly endless patience with a crying baby and a recovering mother. As Luna's strength returned and trust grew between them, she began to share more of her own story with Cole. She told him about her life as a healer among the Blackfoot, the respect she had earned through years of studying traditional medicine and helping her people through illness and injury. "I could set bones, stop bleeding, cure fevers that had killed others," she explained as she nursed Joseph by the fire. "My grandmother taught me the old ways, and I learned new techniques from traders who brought white man's medicine to our village." Cole listened with genuine interest as Luna described the complex world of tribal politics and traditions that had shaped her life. She explained the careful balance between honoring ancient customs and adapting to the changing world, the tensions that arose when different generations disagreed about the best path forward. My father was a war chief, but he understood that fighting wouldn't bring back the buffalo or stop the soldiers from taking our land, Luna said. He tried to find peaceful solutions whenever possible, even when the younger warriors called him weak. The story of Luna's romance with Lieutenant David Morrison emerged gradually over several conversations. Cole never pressed for details, but Luna found herself wanting to explain how she had ended up pregnant and alone. Perhaps it was the safety of the cabin, or Cole's obvious lack of judgment, but she felt compelled to share the truth. David wasn't like the other soldiers, she said one evening as snow began to fall outside the cabin windows. He spoke our language fluently and showed genuine respect for our customs. When he came to negotiate water rights for the fort, he spent time learning about our perspective instead of just making demands. Their relationship had developed slowly, over several meetings, built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than mere physical attraction. David had been fascinated by Luna's knowledge of medicine and had shared his own education about anatomy and disease prevention. Their conversations had often lasted late into the night, covering everything from healing techniques to philosophical questions about life and death. He asked me to marry him, Luna revealed, surprising Cole with this detail. Said he would resign his commission and make a life with me among my people. But the army transferred him before we could make any firm plans. The attack at Little Creek had happened while David was at his new posting, hundreds of miles away. Luna never knew whether he had received her letters about the pregnancy, or her desperate pleas for help after the tribal council's decision. For all she knew, he might think she had simply forgotten him or chosen tribal loyalty over their love. Do you think he would help you if he knew about Joseph? Cole asked gently. Luna considered the question carefully. If he knew, yes. David would never abandon his child. But finding him would mean leaving Joseph with strangers or taking him on a dangerous journey across hostile territory. Either choice could get him killed. The practical difficulties of contacting David seemed insurmountable given Luna's current circumstances. She had no money, no transportation, no way to send letters or receive replies. More importantly, she couldn't be certain that reaching out to David wouldn't bring unwanted attention from military authorities who might view her as a hostile Indian or enemy combatant. As winter deepened around the cabin, Luna began to learn skills that would help her navigate the white man's world. Cole taught her to read and write English more fluently, building on the basic education she had received from missionaries who had visited her tribe. They spent evenings by the fire with Cole's small collection of books, Luna reading aloud while Joseph slept in his cradle. "You're a natural teacher," Cole observed as Luna helped him understand some of the medicinal properties of plants she had gathered during her brief time in the wilderness. Have you ever thought about formal education? The idea had never occurred to Luna before her exile, but now she found it intriguing. White society seemed to value formal learning in ways her tribe had not, and she could see how education might provide opportunities for both her and Joseph in the future. Cole also taught Luna practical skills for frontier life that differed from tribal traditions. She learned to cook on a wood stove instead of an open fire, to preserve food in glass jars, to maintain oil lamps and tend a fireplace efficiently. These skills would be essential if she ever needed to live independently in white society. Most importantly, Cole helped Luna understand the legal and social customs that governed white civilization. He explained concepts like property ownership, marriage licenses, citizenship rights, and legal contracts. This knowledge was crucial for a woman who might need to navigate these systems while protecting her son's interests. The law isn't always fair, Cole warned her, especially not for Indians or women. But knowing how it works gives you a better chance of working within it instead of being crushed by it. Luna absorbed this education eagerly, recognizing it as another form of medicine that might heal the wounds left by her exile. Knowledge was power, and power was what she needed to build a secure future for Joseph. As weeks turned into months, the relationship between Luna, Cole, and baby Joseph evolved into something resembling a family. Cole proved to be surprisingly good with the baby, often taking over feeding duties when Luna was exhausted, or helping with the countless small tasks that caring for an infant required. "He's got a good grip," Cole observed one evening as Joseph clutched his finger with tiny but determined hands. Going to be strong like his mama. Luna noticed how Cole's face lit up when Joseph smiled or made happy baby sounds. The lonely cowboy was clearly starved for family connection, and caring for Joseph seemed to fill a void that had existed since he lost his own wife and child. She began to wonder if their arrangement might benefit Cole as much as it helped her. The domestic routines they developed felt natural and comfortable. Cole handled the heavy outdoor work, maintaining the animals and keeping the cabin supplied with firewood and fresh meat. Luna managed the indoor tasks, cooking, cleaning, and mending, while caring for Joseph. They shared evening meals and conversations by the fire, creating a sense of normalcy that neither had experienced in years. But Luna was careful not to assume too much about the future. Cole had never made any romantic overtures or suggested that their arrangement might become permanent. She remained acutely aware that she was essentially a refugee dependent on his charity, and that circumstances could change without warning. "You don't owe me anything," Cole said one evening, as if reading her thoughts. "I want you to know that you and Joseph are welcome here for as long as you need, with no expectations or conditions." His words provided reassurance, but Luna also recognized the unspoken complexity of their situation. They were two lonely people who had found comfort in each other's company, but their different backgrounds and uncertain legal status created barriers that couldn't be ignored indefinitely. The peaceful isolation of Cole's cabin couldn't last forever, and the first signs of trouble appeared as winter began to give way to early spring. A traveling merchant who stopped to trade supplies brought disturbing news from the territorial capital. "Lot of talk about Indian troubles lately," the merchant mentioned casually as Cole examined his wares. "Folks are getting nervous about raids and such. Army's been asking questions about missing tribal members." Luna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. If military authorities were investigating her disappearance, it might mean that her exile had created political complications for her former tribe. Or worse, it might indicate that someone was actively searching for her. Cole noticed her reaction and casually changed the subject, but Luna could see the concern in his eyes. After the merchant left, they discussed the implications of what they had heard. "Could be nothing," Cole said, but his tone suggested he didn't entirely believe that. "Could also mean someone stirring up trouble and looking for excuses to cause problems for peaceful tribes." Luna knew her people well enough to guess at other possibilities. Chief Standing Bear might be facing pressure from younger warriors who disapproved of her exile, preferring more violent solutions to tribal problems. Or rival chiefs might be using her case to question Standing Bear's leadership and judgment. More troubling was the possibility that someone connected to Lieutenant David Morrison had learned about her pregnancy and was trying to locate her for political reasons. A half-white child of a military officer could become a valuable pawn in negotiations between the army and various tribes. "We need to be more careful," Luna said finally. "If the wrong people learn about Joseph's parentage, it could put all of us in danger." Cole nodded grimly. "I've been thinking the same thing. Maybe it's time to make some preparations just in case." Neither of them spoke aloud the most frightening possibility of all, that Luna's exile might not have been the end of her troubles, but merely the beginning. As spring approached and travel became easier, the sanctuary of the isolated cabin might no longer be enough to protect them from the forces gathering in the outside world. The peaceful interlude was ending, and Luna could only hope that the Strength and knowledge she had gained during these months of healing would be enough to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She looked at Joseph, sleeping peacefully in his handmade cradle, and silently vowed that she would protect him no matter what the cost. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it the first real threat to the peaceful sanctuary Luna and Joseph had found at Cole's cabin. The trouble began with a seemingly innocent encounter when 3 cavalry soldiers rode up to the homestead on a bright April morning, their blue uniforms stark against the green backdrop of newly budding trees. Cole was out checking fence lines when the soldiers arrived, leaving Luna alone in the cabin with Joseph. She watched through the window as the men dismounted and examined the property with the careful attention of people conducting an official investigation. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the methodical way they searched for clues. The lead soldier, a sergeant with graying temples and hard eyes, knocked firmly on the cabin door. Luna had no choice but to answer, though she kept Joseph hidden in the back room and positioned herself so that she could grab Cole's rifle if necessary. "Ma'am," the sergeant said, touching his hat brim in a gesture of politeness that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Sergeant William Hayes, United States Army. We're conducting inquiries about missing persons in this territory. Mind if we ask you a few questions?" Luna forced herself to remain calm, drawing on every lesson her grandmother had taught her about hiding emotions when dealing with enemies. "My husband isn't home right now," she said carefully. "Perhaps you could return when he's available to speak with you." Sergeant Hayes smiled, but it was the predatory expression of a man who had caught someone in a lie. "Now that's interesting. Ma'am, see, we've been told this property belongs to a bachelor named Cole Garrett. When did you folks get married?" The question was a trap, designed to expose Luna's vulnerable status and potentially discover her true identity. Before she could formulate a response, the sound of approaching hoofbeats announced Cole's return. He rode into the yard with deliberate casualness, but Luna could see the tension in his shoulders as he dismounted and approached the soldiers. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Cole said with friendly politeness that masked his wariness. "Something I can help you with?" Sergeant Hayes studied Cole with the practiced eye of a man who had interrogated countless people during his military career. "Mr. Garrett, I presume? We're investigating reports of missing tribal members in this area. Specifically, we're looking for a Blackfoot woman named Luna Moonhunter who disappeared several months ago." Luna felt the blood drain from her face, though she tried to maintain her composure. The fact that they knew her name, this wasn't a random search. Someone had specifically directed them to look for her. The question was whether they were acting on behalf of her former tribe or pursuing their own agenda. "Never heard that name before," Cole said without hesitation. "Don't get many Indians through here, friendly or otherwise. Most of them stay closer to the reservation lands." The sergeant's eyes narrowed as he studied Cole's face for signs of deception. "That's curious, Mr. Garrett, because we have reliable information suggesting this woman might have sought shelter with white settlers after being exiled from her tribe. She was pregnant at the time of her disappearance." Cole maintained his innocent expression perfectly, but Luna could see the wheels turning behind his eyes as he processed the implications of what they'd been told. Someone with detailed knowledge of her situation had provided information to the military. But who? And why? Well, if I'd seen a pregnant Indian woman wandering around in the wilderness, I certainly would have reported it to the authorities. Cole said reasonably. A person would have to be pretty heartless to leave someone in that condition to fend for themselves. One of the younger soldiers spoke up for the first time. "Sir, we also heard reports about a woman and baby living on this property. The neighbors mentioned seeing smoke from your chimney at odd hours, like someone was cooking meals for more than one person." Luna's heart sank as she realized their careful isolation hadn't been as complete as they'd hoped. Neighboring homesteaders apparently paid more attention to each other's business than she had assumed, and someone had noticed the signs of additional occupants at Cole's cabin. Cole's response was smooth and immediate. "That would be my wife. And new baby," he said with apparent pride. "We've been keeping pretty much to ourselves since the birth. You know how it is with first-time parents nervous about exposing the little one to too much excitement." Sergeant Hayes exchanged glances with his men, clearly skeptical but unable to prove anything based on the evidence at hand. "Congratulations on your new family, Mr. Garrett. I don't suppose we could meet your wife and child?" Just to verify that everything's in order here, the moment of truth had arrived. Luna knew that she and Joseph would have to face the soldiers' scrutiny, and their survival might depend on her ability to convincingly play the role of Cole's wife. She took a deep breath, wrapped Joseph in a blanket that concealed most of his features, and stepped out onto the porch. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said with as much confidence as she could muster. "I apologize for not greeting you properly, but the baby was sleeping and I didn't want to disturb him." Sergeant Hayes studied Luna's face intently, clearly trying to determine whether she matched the description he'd been given. Luna had changed significantly during her months at the cabin. She was healthier, better fed, and dressed in white woman's clothing that Cole had acquired for her. Still, her distinctive cheekbones and dark eyes clearly marked her native heritage. "Ma'am," the sergeant said slowly, "you wouldn't happen to be part Indian, would you? You have certain features that suggest mixed heritage." Cole stepped closer to Luna, placing a protective arm around her shoulders in a gesture that looked natural, but positioned him between her and the soldiers. "My wife's grandmother was Cherokee," he said easily. "Family came west during the removals back in the 30s. She's as American as apple pie, though." The lie was clever because it explained Luna's appearance while distancing her from the Blackfoot tribe the soldiers were investigating. Cherokee removal was historical fact, and many families with mixed heritage lived throughout the Western Territories. It was exactly the kind of background that would raise no official suspicions. Joseph chose that moment to wake up and begin fussing, providing a perfect distraction from the soldiers' scrutiny. Luna rocked him gently and began humming a lullaby, carefully choosing a melody she'd learned from white missionaries rather than traditional tribal songs. "Beautiful baby," one of the younger soldiers said with genuine warmth. "How old is he?" "3 months," Luna replied, which was approximately correct and matched the timeline of when a married couple might reasonably have had a child. "He's been such a good baby, sleeping through the night already." Sergeant Hayes seemed to be running out of questions and excuses to prolong the visit. He studied the family tableau for another long moment, clearly frustrated by his inability to find definitive proof of what he suspected. Finally, he touched his hat brim again. "Well, congratulations again on your new son," he said formally. "If you happen to see or hear anything about missing tribal members in the area, please report it to the fort immediately. There are safety concerns involved." After the soldiers mounted their horses and rode away, Cole and Luna remained on the porch until the dust cloud disappeared over the horizon. Only then did Cole's carefully maintained composure crack slightly. "That was too close," he said quietly. "They know more than they were letting on, and they'll be back if they get any additional information." Luna nodded grimly, understanding that their period of peaceful isolation was effectively over. Someone was actively hunting for her, and it was only a matter of time before they returned with more evidence or different tactics. Over the following weeks, signs of increased military activity became impossible to ignore. Cavalry patrols passed by the cabin with suspicious frequency, always finding excuses to stop and ask casual questions about travelers or unusual activities in the area. Cole began varying his routes to town and timing his trips to avoid predictable patterns. The situation became more concerning when Cole returned from a supply run with disturbing news from the territorial capital. "There's a new commanding officer at Fort Harrison," he told Luna that evening as they sat by the fire. "Colonel Marcus Thornton transferred in from back east. Word is he's got specific orders to resolve the Indian problem in this territory. Luna felt a chill of recognition at the name. Colonel Thornton had a reputation among her people as a man who believed the only good Indian was a dead Indian. His previous postings had been marked by unnecessarily violent confrontations and harsh treatment of tribal populations. "There's more," Cole continued reluctantly. "I heard he's been asking specific questions about Lieutenant David Morrison, and whether he had any unauthorized contact with tribal members before his transfer. Someone's been feeding him information about you and Joseph." The pieces of a larger conspiracy were beginning to come together in Luna's mind. If Colonel Thornton was investigating David Morrison's relationship with her, it suggested that David might be in trouble with his superiors. Their romance could be seen as fraternization with the enemy, especially if it resulted in classified information being shared. More troubling was the possibility that Joseph's existence could be used as evidence against David, either to court-martial him for inappropriate conduct or to blackmail him into cooperation with military objectives. A half-Indian child with a military father represented exactly the kind of scandal that could destroy an officer's career. "We need to get word to David," Luna said finally. "If he's being investigated, he deserves to know about Joseph before someone else uses our son against him." Cole nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking the same thing. But contacting him directly could expose all of us to more danger. We need to be smart about how we approach this." They spent the evening developing a plan that would allow them to reach David without revealing their location or putting Joseph at risk. Cole had contacts among the civilian traders who dealt with various military installations, men who could carry messages discreetly for the right price. As the external pressures mounted, Luna faced an agonizing choice between the safety Cole's cabin provided and the freedom that only came with true independence. She had grown to love their quiet domestic life, and she could see that Cole had genuine feelings for both her and Joseph. But she also understood that her presence was putting him in increasing danger. "You saved our lives," she told Cole one evening as they watched Joseph play with wooden toys Cole had carved. "But I won't let our problems destroy everything you've built here. If staying puts you at risk, then we need to leave." Cole's response was immediate and firm. "You're not going anywhere. This is your home now, yours and Joseph's. We'll face whatever comes together." The conviction in his voice touched Luna deeply, but it also highlighted the impossible position they were in. Cole was willing to sacrifice his safety and security for them, but Luna couldn't ask him to make that choice. She had already cost one man his future. She wouldn't do the same to another. What if there was another way? She asked carefully. "What if we could solve this problem without running or hiding?" Cole studied her face in the firelight, seeing the determination that had carried her through exile and childbirth. "What are you thinking?" Luna had been developing an idea that was both risky and potentially brilliant. Instead of waiting for their enemies to find them, they could take control of the situation by revealing the truth on their own terms. It would require careful timing and the right allies, but it might be their only chance for a permanent solution. "Colonel Thornton wants to use Joseph as a weapon against David," she said slowly. "But what if we turn that weapon around? What if Joseph became the proof of David's honor instead of his shame?" The plan Luna outlined was audacious in its simplicity. They would publicly reveal the truth about Joseph's parentage, but frame it as a love story rather than a scandal. David Morrison would be portrayed as a man who had fallen in love with a native woman and wanted to do right by her and their child. The fact that military bureaucracy had prevented their marriage would become evidence of institutional failures rather than personal misconduct. "It could work," Cole said thoughtfully. "Public opinion has been shifting toward more sympathetic views of mixed marriages, especially when children are involved. If we get the story out first, we control how it's told. But the plan would require Luna to emerge from hiding and face the consequences of her choices. She would have to trust that white society's sense of justice and romance would protect her family better than continued secrecy. It was a massive gamble with the highest possible stakes before Luna and Cole could implement their plan. A new threat emerged that forced their hand. 3 rough-looking men rode up to the cabin on a gray morning in late May, and unlike the military visitors, these men made no pretense of official business. Luna recognized them immediately as the type of men who made their living in the shadowy spaces between law and lawlessness. Bounty hunters, slave catchers, men who would capture anyone for the right price and ask no questions about what happened afterward. Cole was repairing the roof when they arrived, giving him a clear view of the approaching riders and a few precious minutes to signal Luna to hide. She grabbed Joseph and retreated to the root cellar they had prepared for exactly this type of emergency. Leaving Cole to face the visitors alone, the leader of the group was a scarred man named Dutch Crenshaw, whose reputation for violence was well known throughout the territory. He sat his horse with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating others, and his pale eyes held the cold calculation of a predator sizing up prey. "Morning, Garrett," Dutch called out, using Cole's name with a familiarity that suggested he'd done his research. "Heard you got yourself a little Indian squaw and her half-breed brat. We're here to collect them." Cole's hand moved casually toward the rifle he'd positioned within easy reach. "I think you've got some bad information, Dutch. No Indians here, just me and my family." Dutch's laugh was ugly and knowing. "Now, don't try to play cute with me, boy. We know all about your pet redskin and her bastard kid. Colonel Thornton's offering good money for them, alive and unharmed. Make this easy on yourself and hand them over." The confirmation that Colonel Thornton was behind the bounty hunters explained how they'd obtained such detailed information about the situation. Military intelligence had been used to recruit civilian mercenaries, giving the colonel plausible deniability if anything went wrong. "Even if what you're saying was true," Cole said carefully, "I wouldn't hand over a woman and baby to men like you. God only knows what you'd do to them." Dutch's expression hardened, and his companions began to spread out in a flanking pattern that suggested they'd done this kind of work before. "That's where you're wrong, Garrett. We know exactly what we're going to do to them. The woman's going back to her tribe for a proper punishment, and the kid's going to a nice Christian orphanage where he can learn to be civilized." Luna, listening from the cellar, felt sick at the thought of Joseph being torn away from her and raised by strangers who would teach him to hate his heritage. The threat gave new urgency to their need for a permanent solution. Cole's response was firm and final. "You boys need to ride on out of here now. There's nothing here for you, and you're not welcome on my land." Dutch nodded to his companions, and suddenly the morning exploded into violence. The bounty hunters had clearly expected an easy capture, but Cole was ready for them. His first shot took down Dutch's horse, sending the man tumbling to the ground. His second shot shattered the shoulder of one of the flanking riders. The gun battle was brief but intense, with bullets splintering wood and shattering windows around the cabin. Cole had the advantage of cover and superior marksmanship, but the bounty hunters had numbers and desperation on their side. When the smoke cleared, Dutch lay wounded but alive, while his surviving companion helped the injured man mount their remaining horses. "This ain't over, Garrett," Dutch snarled as they prepared to retreat. "Thornton wants that woman bad enough to keep sending men until someone gets her. Next time we come back with more guns." After the bounty hunters disappeared, Cole helped Luna and Joseph emerge from the cellar. The cabin was damaged but still livable, and more importantly, they had survived their first direct confrontation with their enemies. "They'll be back," Luna said quietly, surveying the bullet holes in the cabin walls. "And next time they'll bring an army." Cole nodded grimly, understanding that their peaceful sanctuary had been permanently shattered. The time for hiding was over. Now they had to fight for their right to exist as a family, using weapons more powerful than guns. "Then we better make sure there isn't a next time," he said with determination. "It's time to take this fight to them instead of waiting for them to come to us." The gathering storm was about to break, and Luna could only hope that the love and courage they had built together would be strong enough to weather whatever tempest lay ahead. 3 days after the bounty hunter attack, Luna made the most dangerous decision of her life. Instead of fleeing deeper into the wilderness or waiting for the next assault on their sanctuary, she chose to ride directly into the heart of enemy territory. Fort Harrison represented everything that threatened her family's survival, but it also offered the only chance for a permanent resolution to their crisis. Cole had argued against the plan with every logical point he could muster. "It's suicide, Luna. You'll be walking into Thornton's hands exactly like he wants. Once you're inside that fort, there's no guarantee you'll ever come out again." But Luna's mind was made up with the steel determination that had carried her through exile and childbirth. "If we keep running, Joseph will never have a real life. He'll always be looking over his shoulder, always wondering when the next threat will appear. I won't raise my son in fear." The plan they had developed was audacious in its boldness. Luna would present herself at Fort Harrison under a flag of truce, demanding to speak with Lieutenant David Morrison about their son. She would force the military to acknowledge Joseph's parentage publicly, making it impossible for Colonel Thornton to use the child as a secret weapon against David. Cole insisted on accompanying her despite the additional risk to himself. "You saved my life by giving me a family to protect," he told her firmly. "I'm not abandoning that family now when you need me most." They left Joseph in the care of Martha Henderson, Cole's nearest neighbor and the only person in the territory they trusted completely. Martha was a widow in her 60s who had raised 7 children of her own and understood the stakes involved without needing detailed explanations. "That baby will be safe with me," Martha promised as she cradled Joseph in her weathered arms. "You folks go do what needs doing, and don't worry about anything here." The 40-mile journey to Fort Harrison took them through some of the most beautiful and treacherous country in the Montana Territory. Rolling hills covered with spring. Wildflowers gave way to rocky canyons where hostile forces could easily stage ambushes. Every mile brought them closer to a confrontation that would determine their family's fate. Luna rode with the quiet dignity of a woman who had already faced the worst that life could offer and survived. She wore her finest dress, a blue cotton garment that Cole had purchased for her in town, and she carried herself with the bearing of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. "Whatever happens in there," she told Cole as the fort's wooden walls came into view, "I want you to know that these months with you have been the happiest of my life. You gave me more than shelter, you gave me hope." Cole's response was characteristically direct and honest. "You gave me more than that. You gave me a reason to keep living when I thought my life was over." Fort Harrison was a testament to military efficiency and frontier pragmatism. High wooden walls enclosed a collection of utilitarian buildings, designed for function rather than comfort. Soldiers moved through the compound with the disciplined precision of men who understood they were surrounded by hostile territory and potential threats. The sentries at the main gate were clearly expecting them, which confirmed Luna's suspicion that Colonel Thornton had been monitoring their movements. Rather than being turned away or arrested immediately, they were escorted with surprising courtesy to the commanding officer's quarters. Colonel Marcus Thornton proved to be exactly what Luna had expected, a career military officer whose prejudices were masked by a veneer of civilized politeness. He was a man in his 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of pale eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. "Miss Moonhunter," Thornton said with mock courtesy as Luna was brought into his office. "Or should I say Mrs. Garrett? You've certainly led us on quite a chase these past few months." Luna refused to be intimidated by either his sarcasm or the armed guards positioned around the room. "I've come to speak with Lieutenant David Morrison about our son. I believe you've been using that child to threaten his career." Thornton's smile was cold and calculating. "Lieutenant Morrison is currently confined to quarters pending investigation into charges of fraternization with enemy combatants and potential treason. Your testimony could either save his career or end it permanently. The threat was clear, but also revealed the weakness in Thornton's position. If David was still under investigation rather than already court-martialed, it meant Thornton lacked sufficient evidence to proceed without Luna's cooperation. Her voluntary appearance had actually strengthened her negotiating position. "I want to see him," Luna demanded. "David has a right to know about his son, and Joseph has a right to know his father." Thornton leaned back in his chair, studying Luna with the predatory interest of a man who enjoyed psychological manipulation that could be arranged under certain conditions. "You see, Miss Moonhunter, your lover's fate depends entirely on how cooperative you're willing to be." Before Luna could respond, the office door burst open and David Morrison himself strode into the room. He was thinner than Luna remembered and showed signs of the stress he'd been under, but his eyes were as gentle and intelligent as ever. More importantly, the love and relief in his expression when he saw Luna was unmistakable. "Luna," he said softly, drinking in the sight of her face. "Thank God you're alive. I've been going out of my mind with worry ever since I got your letter." The admission that David had received her correspondence was a crucial piece of information that changed the entire dynamic of the confrontation. If he knew about Joseph and had been trying to help them, then his actions couldn't be characterized as betrayal or treason. Colonel Thornton's face darkened with anger at this unexpected development. "Lieutenant Morrison, you were ordered to remain in quarters until this matter was resolved." David ignored his commanding officer completely, his attention focused entirely on Luna. "Where is our son? Is he safe? I've been trying to get permission to search for you, but they wouldn't let me leave the fort." "Joseph is safe," Luna assured him, noting how naturally the child's name came to his lips. "He's beautiful, David. He has your eyes and your stubborn streak." The reunion between the lovers was touching evidence of their genuine affection, but Colonel Thornton had no patience for romantic sentiment. "How very touching," he sneered. "Lieutenant Morrison, your career is over. Fraternization with enemy tribes is grounds for court-martial and imprisonment." David finally turned to face his superior officer, and Luna was surprised by the steel in his voice when he spoke. "With respect, sir, Luna's tribe was not at war with the United States at the time of our relationship. In fact, they were actively cooperating with peace negotiations. There was no enemy to fraternize with. What followed was a tense legal and political battle fought with words rather than weapons." David had clearly spent his months of confinement studying military law and preparing his defense. He presented a compelling case that his relationship with Luna had been both legal and beneficial to military objectives. Miss Moonhunter served as an unofficial liaison during peace negotiations, David explained with the precision of a trained lawyer. Her knowledge of both cultures was invaluable in preventing misunderstandings that could have led to violence. Our personal relationship developed naturally from that professional collaboration. Luna found herself admiring David's strategic thinking as much as his courage. He was reframing their romance as a diplomatic success rather than a personal scandal, highlighting the positive outcomes rather than dwelling on military regulations. Colonel Thornton attempted to regain control of the narrative by focusing on Luna's current status. "The woman was exiled from her tribe for carrying your bastard child, Morrison. That hardly sounds like successful diplomacy, but Luna was ready for this attack. I was exiled because grief over recent losses made my people's hearts hard toward anything connected to white soldiers. The council acted from pain, not justice. Many tribal members disagreed with their decision. David stepped forward to stand beside Luna, creating a visual representation of their united front. "Colonel, I formally request permission to marry Miss Moonhunter and acknowledge our son. I take full responsibility for my actions and their consequences." The request put Thornton in an impossible position. Denying permission for a marriage would appear petty and vindictive, especially when the couple was willing to legitimize their relationship through proper channels. Granting permission would eliminate most grounds for disciplinary action against David. Cole, who had remained silent during the confrontation, finally spoke up from his position near the door. "There's something else you should know, Colonel. Miss Moon Hunter and I have been legally married under territorial law for the past month. Her status is that of a United States citizen, not an enemy combatant." The announcement shocked everyone in the room, including Luna herself. Cole was lying to protect her, creating a legal fiction that would make it much harder for the military to claim jurisdiction over her case. A married white woman was entitled to legal protections that an unmarried Indian woman could never hope to receive. David's face showed brief pain at this revelation, but he quickly understood Cole's strategy and played along. "In that case, I formally acknowledge Joseph Garrett as my biological son and request visitation rights as his natural father." Colonel Thornton realized that his carefully constructed trap was collapsing around him. Instead of being able to use Luna and Joseph as weapons against David, he now faced a situation where any action against them would appear to be persecution of American citizens engaged in lawful activities. Desperate to salvage something from the confrontation, Colonel Thornton made one final attempt to assert his authority. "Even if everything you've said is technically legal, the fact remains that Morrison violated the spirit of military discipline. I can still recommend him for transfer to a posting where his judgment won't be questioned." But David had anticipated this possibility and prepared his ultimate defense. "Sir, I believe you should read these documents before making any final decisions about my future." He produced a leather portfolio containing correspondence that Luna had never seen before. As David spread the papers across Thornton's desk, Luna realized that David had been far more active during his confinement than anyone had suspected. "These are letters from tribal leaders throughout the territory," David explained. "Each one specifically requests that I be appointed as permanent liaison for negotiations with their peoples. They trust me because they know I understand and respect their customs." The letters represented a level of political support that even Colonel Thornton couldn't ignore. If multiple tribal chiefs were specifically requesting David's services, removing him would appear to be sabotaging successful diplomatic relationships. More importantly, the letters demonstrated that David's relationship with Luna was viewed by native leaders as evidence of his good faith rather than betrayal. He had become a bridge between two worlds, exactly the kind of officer the military needed for peaceful resolution of frontier conflicts. Luna felt a surge of pride as she realized how effectively David had used their personal relationship to advance broader causes of peace and understanding. He had transformed what could have been a career-ending scandal into a diplomatic asset. Colonel Thornton studied the documents with growing frustration, clearly recognizing that his position was becoming untenable. "This is all very impressive, Lieutenant Morrison, but it doesn't change the fact that you've placed your personal interests above military discipline." David's response was firm and final. "Sir, my personal interests happen to align perfectly with the military's strategic objectives in this territory. I've proven that cooperation and understanding work better than threats and violence. My relationship with Luna and our son represents the future of Indian-white relations." The argument was so compelling that even some of Thornton's own officers began nodding in agreement. Luna could see the colonel's authority crumbling as his subordinates recognized the weakness of his position. The confrontation ended not with dramatic violence, but with bureaucratic defeat. Colonel Thornton, faced with overwhelming evidence that pursuing David would damage his own career more than his targets, reluctantly agreed to drop all charges in exchange for David's transfer to a new posting as Chief Indian Liaison for the territorial government. "You've won this round, Morrison," Thornton said, with barely concealed anger. "But don't think this is over. I'll be watching your career very carefully from now on." David accepted the veiled threat with equanimity, understanding that he had achieved everything he could reasonably hope for. "I look forward to proving that diplomacy serves military interests better than intimidation, sir," as they prepared To leave the fort, Luna finally understood the full scope of what David had accomplished during his months of apparent imprisonment. He had used the time to build political alliances, study legal precedents, and create a network of support that made him virtually untouchable. "You planned all of this," she said with amazement as they walked toward the gate. "You knew I would come here eventually, and you were ready." David's smile was tired but triumphant. "I knew you were too brave and too stubborn to stay hidden forever. I just made sure that when you did emerge, you'd have every possible advantage on your side." Cole's revelation that he had legally married Luna to protect her citizenship status was addressed with characteristic directness. "The marriage is real enough on paper," he told David privately. "But it was always meant to be temporary, just until you could take proper care of your family." David shook Cole's hand with genuine gratitude. "You saved them when I couldn't. I'll never forget that debt." The journey back to collect Joseph was filled with planning for their new life together. David's appointment as territorial Indian liaison would require them to live in the capital, but it also offered opportunities for Luna to use her healing skills and cultural knowledge in official capacities. When they reached Martha Henderson's farm and Luna was reunited with Joseph, the baby's immediate acceptance of David as his father seemed to seal their family's destiny. Joseph reached for David with tiny hands, as if recognizing something familiar in the stranger's gentle voice and loving eyes. "Hello, son," David whispered as he held his child for the first time. "I'm sorry it took me so long to find you," Luna watched the two most important men in her life bonding and felt a peace she had never dared to imagine possible. The confrontation at Fort Harrison had not only secured their freedom, but had also created opportunities for a future none of them could have envisioned during the dark days of exile and hiding. Cole's sacrifice in claiming to be her husband had given them the legal protection they needed, but it had also revealed the depth of his love and loyalty. As David and Luna planned their wedding and new life together, they made sure Cole understood that he would always be considered family, Joseph's honorary uncle and their trusted friend. The storm had passed, but the real journey of building a life together across cultural boundaries was just beginning. 6 weeks after the confrontation at Fort Harrison, Luna Moon Hunter stood in the territorial courthouse wearing a white dress that had belonged to Martha Henderson's daughter, preparing to marry the father of her child in a ceremony that would unite not just two hearts, but two worlds. The wedding was deliberately public, witnessed by territorial officials, military officers, and tribal representatives who had traveled from across Montana to show their support. Governor William Stevens himself performed the ceremony, understanding the political significance of legitimizing this cross-cultural union. His presence sent a clear message that the territorial government supported peaceful cooperation between white settlers and native tribes, using David and Luna's marriage as a symbol of what was possible when people chose love over prejudice. Garrett stood as David's best man, having gracefully dissolved his protective marriage to Luna while maintaining his role as Joseph's honorary uncle. His sacrifice had been crucial to their survival, and both David and Luna made sure he understood that he would always be considered family regardless of legal documents. "You saved us when we had nowhere else to turn," Luna told Cole before the ceremony. "Joseph will grow up knowing that courage and kindness come in many forms, and yours will always be his example." The wedding reception was held at the territorial capital's largest hotel, with guests representing every faction that had been involved in their struggle. Military officers who had initially opposed David's relationship now toasted his success as a diplomat. Tribal leaders who had never before attended a white ceremony participated enthusiastically in the celebration. Most significantly, Chief Standing Bear himself appeared at the reception, having traveled 3 days from the Blackfoot Reservation to witness Luna's marriage. His presence was a public acknowledgement that her exile had been wrong and that she was welcome to reclaim her place among her people if she chose. "I acted from grief and anger," the old chief told Luna during a private moment. The loss of so many warriors clouded my judgment. You have proven that love can build bridges where hatred only creates chasms. Luna accepted his apology with grace, but she also made it clear that her future lay in the white world, where she could serve as a bridge between cultures. I forgive you, honored father, but I cannot forget the lesson I learned in exile. When people choose fear over compassion, everyone suffers. Joseph, now 8 months old and thriving under the attention of his extended family, charmed every guest at the reception. He seemed to understand that this was a special day, smiling and laughing as he was passed from one admiring pair of arms to another. That boy's going to be a natural diplomat, observed Judge William Crawford, who had presided over the legal proceedings that established Joseph's citizenship and inheritance rights. He's already got Republicans and Democrats agreeing on something. David's appointment as territorial Indian liaison proved to be both challenging and rewarding in ways none of them had anticipated. His office in the territorial capital became a meeting ground where tribal representatives and government officials could negotiate disputes before they escalated into violence. Luna's role as David's unofficial partner in these negotiations was unprecedented, but highly effective. Her knowledge of tribal customs and languages, combined with her understanding of white legal systems, made her an invaluable translator, not just of words but of cultural concepts that often created misunderstandings. The Crow delegation is concerned about water rights along the Yellowstone River, Luna would explain to territorial officials. But they're not just talking about legal access, they're talking about spiritual obligations to protect the river for future generations. If we address the spiritual concerns, the legal issues become much easier to resolve. Their first major success came in mediating a dispute between Shoshone hunters and white ranchers over cattle grazing on traditional hunting grounds. Previous negotiations had failed because neither side understood the other's fundamental concerns. But Luna and David were able to create a compromise that respected both tribal traditions and property rights. The solution involved establishing seasonal hunting corridors through ranch lands, with tribal hunters providing meat to ranchers in exchange for grazing access during specific times of year. Both sides got what they needed while building relationships that prevented future conflicts. It's not just about dividing up the land, David explained to skeptical ranchers. It's about finding ways for different people to share the same space productively. Cooperation works better than confrontation for everyone involved. Luna's healing skills also proved valuable in her new role. She established a medical practice that served both white and native patients, using traditional plant medicines alongside conventional treatments to achieve remarkable results. She cured my daughter's fever when the regular doctor said there was nothing more he could do, reported Sarah Mitchell, the wife of a prominent rancher. I don't care what people say about Indian medicine, it works. Word of Luna's medical successes spread quickly through the territory, bringing patients from hundreds of miles away and demonstrating that traditional knowledge had value in the modern world. Her clinic became another bridge between cultures, a place where prejudice broke down in the face of effective healing. Not everyone welcomed the changes that David and Luna's partnership brought to territorial politics. A vocal minority of white settlers viewed their success as a threat to the established order, believing that cooperation with native tribes would inevitably lead to loss of white dominance. The opposition was led by Silas Blackwood, a wealthy rancher and territorial legislator who had built his fortune by acquiring native lands through questionable legal maneuvers. He saw David and Luna's diplomatic successes as direct threats to his ability to continue expanding his holdings through intimidation and legal manipulation. These bleeding hearts are going to give away everything our people fought for, Blackwood declared during heated legislative sessions. Mark my words, this so-called cooperation will end with white families being driven from their homes by savage raiders. Blackwood's inflammatory rhetoric found support among settlers who had lost family members in frontier conflicts and blamed all native people for their grief. He organized political rallies where speakers painted David as a traitor to his own race and Luna as a dangerous foreign influence on territorial policy. The personal attacks became particularly vicious when Blackwood supporters began spreading rumors about Joseph's parentage, suggesting that Luna had been unfaithful to David and that the child might not be his biological son. These lies were designed to undermine David's credibility by questioning his judgment and masculinity. They're trying to destroy our family to advance their political agenda, Luna told David after particularly nasty handbills appeared throughout the capital. Maybe we should consider taking a position somewhere else, away from all this hatred. David's response revealed the steel beneath his diplomatic manner. Running away won't solve anything. If we leave, they'll just find other targets for their hatred. We have to stand and fight for what we've built. The fight took an unexpected turn when some of Blackwood's supporters attempted to have Joseph removed from his parents' custody, claiming that a mixed-race child couldn't receive proper moral guidance in a household that practiced heathen customs alongside Christian beliefs. The custody challenge forced David and Luna to defend not just their parenting but their entire approach to cross-cultural cooperation. The legal proceedings became a public forum for debating whether different peoples could truly live together in harmony. The custody battle brought unexpected support from throughout the territory, as people who had benefited from David and Luna's work rallied to their defense. Ranchers whose disputes had been peacefully resolved testified about the couple's integrity and judgment. Military officers praised David's success in preventing conflicts that could have cost lives and resources. Most powerfully, a delegation of tribal mothers appeared in court to testify about Luna's character and parenting abilities. These women, representing multiple tribes, spoke eloquently about Luna's wisdom, compassion, and dedication to her child's welfare. Luna Moonhunter raised me when my own mother died in childbirth, testified Mary White Eagle, a young Blackfoot woman who had traveled 3 days to appear in court. She taught me healing arts, Christian prayers, and tribal traditions with equal respect. If she can raise a stranger's child with such love, how can anyone question her devotion to her own son? The testimony revealed that Luna had quietly served as an informal mother figure to dozens of children throughout her life, taking in orphans and training young people in healing arts, regardless of their tribal affiliation. Her reputation as a nurturing teacher extended far beyond her own people. Judge Crawford was clearly moved by the testimony supporting Luna's parenting abilities. This court has heard overwhelming evidence that Joseph Garrett Morrison is a healthy, happy child being raised by loving parents who are providing him with the best possible education in both white and native customs. The judge's ruling not only dismissed the custody challenge, but also included a strong rebuke of those who had brought the case. Using a child as a weapon in political disputes represents the worst kind of moral corruption, Crawford declared. This court will not tolerate such tactics. The victory in court strengthened David and Luna's position considerably, but it also revealed the depth of opposition they face from those who profited from conflict between cultures. Silas Blackwood's political machine would not give up easily, and more subtle attacks were certain to follow. Amidst the political turmoil, life continued its natural rhythms for the Morrison family. Joseph took his first steps on a crisp autumn morning, toddling between his parents' outstretched arms in the parlor of their comfortable home near the territorial capital. "Look at him go," David marveled as Joseph lurched determinedly toward him. "He's got your stubborn streak, Luna. Once he sets his mind on something, nothing stops him." Joseph's development was remarkable in every way. At 10 months old, he was already showing signs of the intelligence he had inherited from both parents. Babbling in sounds that seemed to incorporate elements of English, Blackfoot, and his own invented language, Luna delighted in teaching Joseph traditional lullabies and stories, while David read to him from children's books and taught him simple words in multiple languages. The child was growing up truly bilingual and bicultural. comfortable with different customs and ways of thinking about the world. He's going to have advantages that neither of us ever had, Luna observed as she watched David teaching Joseph to stack wooden blocks. He'll understand both worlds from birth instead of having to learn about one or the other as a stranger. The couple made sure that Joseph maintained connections to both sides of his heritage by hosting regular gatherings, where tribal elders shared stories and white neighbors participated in cultural exchanges. Their home became a meeting place where different traditions could be celebrated together. Garrett remained a constant presence in Joseph's life, visiting weekly and taking on the role of the child's honorary grandfather. His carpentry skills were put to good use, building toys and furniture perfectly sized for a growing toddler. "Uncle Cole made this just for you," Luna would tell Joseph as she presented each new wooden creation. "Someday when you're bigger, he'll teach you how to make things with your own hands." Martha Henderson also maintained her connection to the family, serving as Joseph's beloved grandmother figure and providing wisdom about child rearing that proved invaluable to the new parents. As David and Luna's first year of marriage drew to a close, they began to understand that their personal success was part of a much larger transformation taking place throughout the Western territories. Their work as cultural bridges was being replicated by other couples and families who chose cooperation over conflict. "We're not unique," David observed during one of their evening conversations. "All across the frontier, people are discovering that they have more in common than they have differences. Our job is to prove that this approach works better than the old ways of hatred and violence." Luna agreed, but she also understood that their success made them targets for those who profited from division and conflict. Change always threatens people who benefit from the way things are. We have to be prepared for more challenges, probably more dangerous ones. Their vision extended beyond merely resolving disputes to creating new institutions that could sustain peaceful cooperation between cultures. They began planning a school that would educate children from all backgrounds together, teaching them to see diversity as strength rather than threat. Imagine children who grow up speaking multiple languages, understanding different ways of solving problems, respecting various spiritual traditions, Luna said excitedly. "They'll build a world we can barely imagine." The school project attracted support from unexpected quarters, including some military officers who recognized that cultural understanding would be more effective than military force in maintaining frontier peace. Even some former opponents began to see the practical advantages of the approach David and Luna advocated. But as they prepared for the next phase of their work, both David and Luna understood that their greatest challenges lay ahead. Building bridges between cultures was delicate work, and there were powerful forces arrayed against anyone who threatened the profitable status quo of conflict and division. The foundation they had laid was strong, but the structure they hoped to build would require courage, wisdom, and allies they had not yet found. As winter approached and they planned for the future, they could only hope that love would prove stronger than hatred, and that their small family could help heal the wounds that divided their world. 5 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the Frontier Academy as 5-year-old Joseph Morrison helped his mother prepare the classroom for another day of learning. The school that David and Luna had dreamed of during their first year of marriage had become a thriving reality, educating 43 children from diverse backgrounds in an atmosphere of mutual respect and understanding. "Mama, will Billy Crowfeather be back today?" Joseph asked as he carefully arranged wooden blocks on a low table. His mixed heritage was evident in his features, but more importantly, it was reflected in his easy comfort with children from multiple cultures. His grandmother said the fever broke yesterday, so I expect he'll be here, Luna replied, adjusting the herb bundles hanging from the classroom ceiling. Traditional medicines were part of the curriculum alongside conventional subjects, teaching all students that knowledge came from many sources. The academy had been Luna's greatest professional achievement, but it represented much more than educational innovation. In a territory where most schools remained segregated by race and culture, the Frontier Academy proved that children could learn together regardless of their backgrounds. David entered the classroom carrying his morning coffee and a stack of territorial government reports. His role as Chief Indian Liaison having evolved into something approaching a cabinet position. At 37, he had become one of the most influential men in Montana Territory, respected by both white officials and tribal leaders. "The governor wants us to host a delegation from Washington next month," he told Luna as Joseph scampered off to help other early arriving students. "They're considering our educational model for implementation throughout the Western Territories." Luna felt a surge of pride mixed with apprehension. National attention would validate their work, but also expose them to criticism from those who still opposed. Cultural integration. "Are we ready for that kind of scrutiny?" she asked. David's smile reflected the confidence they had both gained through years of successful collaboration. "We've been ready since the day you decided to walk into Fort Harrison instead of running away. Everything since then has just been proving what we already knew was true." Their peaceful morning routine was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor who would change their understanding of their own story. Garrett rode up to the academy with a young woman beside him, both dust-covered from hard traveling. The woman was clearly Native American, perhaps 25 years old, with the bearing of someone accustomed to respect and authority. More striking was her obvious pregnancy, which explained Cole's urgency in bringing her to Luna's attention. "Luna, this is Running Fox," Cole said as he helped the woman dismount. "She's Chief Standing Bear's granddaughter, and she's got a story you need to hear." Running Fox's tale unfolded like an echo from Luna's own past. She had fallen in love with a white trader named Samuel Roberts and was now carrying his child. When her pregnancy became obvious, Tribal Council had voted to exile her just as they had exiled Luna 5 years earlier. "My grandfather spoke against the decision," Running Fox explained as Luna examined her in the academy's medical room. "He said your story proved that exile only creates more pain for everyone involved." But the younger men shouted him down. Luna felt the familiar anger at injustice, but it was tempered by the understanding that came from her own journey. "You're safe here," she assured Running Fox. "We'll help you find your Samuel, and we'll make sure your child has every opportunity for a good life." The arrival of another exiled mother created an opportunity to demonstrate how far their community had evolved. Within hours, territorial officials, tribal representatives, and local citizens were working together to locate Samuel Roberts and arrange a reunion with his pregnant love. Samuel Roberts proved to be a traveling merchant currently in Denver, unaware that Running Fox was carrying his child or that she had been exiled for their relationship. David used his official connections to send urgent messages, and within 2 weeks, Samuel was racing back to Montana Territory. The reunion between Samuel and Running Fox took place in the same courthouse where David and Luna had been married. But this time the ceremony was attended by Chief Standing Bear himself. The old chief's presence represented a public acknowledgement that the tribal council's exile policies had been wrong. "I have learned from my granddaughter's pain and Luna Moonhunter's courage," Standing Bear announced to the assembled witnesses. "A people who cast out their children for choosing love over hatred cannot call themselves wise." The chief's speech marked a turning point in tribal policy that would affect generations of Native people facing similar choices. Love would no longer be considered betrayal, and children of mixed heritage would be welcomed rather than rejected. Joseph served as ring bearer for Samuel and Running Fox's wedding, solemnly carrying the simple gold bands that would symbolize another bridge between cultures. At 5 years old, he understood that he was witnessing something important, even if he couldn't fully grasp its historical significance. "Someday you'll tell your own children about this day," Luna whispered to her son as they watched the ceremony. "You'll explain how love conquered fear, one family at a time." 3 months after Running Fox's wedding, The letter that would cement David and Luna's place in history arrived from the territorial governor. The delegation from Washington had been so impressed with the Frontier Academy that Congress was authorizing funding for similar schools throughout the Western Territories. They want us to train teachers and develop curriculum for 25 new schools, David said, hardly believing the scope of what was being offered. Luna, we could influence the education of thousands of children. The opportunity was magnificent but also daunting. Accepting would require them to travel extensively, leaving their comfortable home base to establish schools in remote and potentially hostile communities. It would mean years of hard work with no guarantee of success. Luna's response reflected the wisdom she had gained through exile, rescue, and rebuilding. We didn't choose this path because it was easy. We chose it because it was right. If we can help thousands of children grow up without the hatred that nearly destroyed us, how can we say no? The decision to accept the federal commission marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one that would take them far from the Montana territory they had learned to call home. But it also represented the ultimate validation of everything they had suffered to achieve. On their final evening in the home where they had built their family and their dreams, David and Luna sat on the porch watching Joseph play with the wooden horse Cole had carved for his 6th birthday. The boy was chattering happily in the mixture of English and Blackfoot that had become his natural language. "Do you ever regret the choices we made?" David asked, his arm around Luna's shoulders as they watched their son. The easy path would have been to keep quiet, stay hidden, avoid all the conflict and controversy. Luna considered the question carefully, thinking of everything they had gained and lost through their journey together. "I regret the pain we caused others and the pain that was caused to us. But I don't regret choosing love over fear or hope over hatred. Joseph will grow up in a world where his heritage is a strength rather than a burden." Garrett joined them on the porch, carrying the leather satchel that contained the documents for his purchase of their property. He would maintain the Frontier Academy in their absence, ensuring that their educational vision continued while they worked to establish new schools. "You gave me a family when I thought I'd lost everything," Cole said simply. "Taking care of your home and your school while you're gone is the least I can do to repay that gift." As stars appeared in the Montana sky, Luna reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this moment. 5 years ago, she had been a desperate woman giving birth alone in a wilderness cave. Convinced that death was preferable to the shame of exile, now she was an educator, healer, and diplomat whose work would influence policy throughout the Western Territories. More importantly, she was a wife and mother whose love had created bridges between worlds that many people believed could never be connected. "The wilderness where I gave birth to Joseph was the loneliest place on earth," she told David as they prepared to go inside for the night. "But it was also where I learned that love could survive anything, even when hope seemed impossible." Joseph ran to his parents, tired from play but eager for the bedtime stories that had become their family tradition. As they settled him between them on the porch swing, Luna began the tale he loved most, the story of a lonely cowboy who found a mother and baby in a cave and discovered that family could be chosen as well as born. The story would continue in new places with new challenges, but its essence would remain the same. Love had conquered fear, understanding had defeated ignorance, and a child born in exile had become the bridge to a better future for everyone.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.